essentially ready. Okay, so we lost you again, but we're back again. Okay, so as I was saying, you can now plant in this soil. And a good way to test if you have enough water is that your little outlets that you poked the holes into, that is where water will seep out when it's too full. So you would want to fill this up with water to get everything nice and soaked, and then just water as you go. You can also just look down the pipe to check the water level, and you should be able to see it, you know, when you go to check on the box. So I would probably, after I've planted seedlings in here, add on a bit of mulch just to keep it really, what's the word? Like moist and not so it doesn't dry out, particularly going into the dry season. But yeah, does anyone have any questions for that segment of the workshop? No, I don't think so. Okay, who's on chat? All right, well, we might move along then to George's planter box, which she made herself last weekend.
Hey everyone, how are you going out there? Sorry for the little cutouts. We hope you're all still with us. So one thing I'll just say about planter boxes, the reason you might do a planter box rather than just digging into the garden might be perhaps you're limited with space. So planter boxes can be good if you've got a balcony and you want to put something up. Oh, we've got a question. Claire says she missed the very start, but is there a reason to use styrofoam? I think it's just because these are, they're very available, they're free, they're also like, they don't absorb the water, so they're waterproof. They're an existing resource, so giving it a second life and reusing it. They're very light, so they're also quite portable, which is another reason you might want to do this style of planter box, is that you can move it around. So if you're renting or in an apartment, then you can actually take your veggie bed with you afterwards. And the other thing is that it's also just a small area. So you only need to build up the soil in that small area rather than kind of building up your soil on a larger patch. And it also won't get washed away. So you know, when the big rains come and things, you're not going to lose that soil and have to build it up again, which is what I have to do in my garden every year, you know, shoveling lots and lots of horse poo and cow poo. So that can be a good reason for doing a planter box. So I'll just show you this one. So last Sunday I was home and I was like, you know, my friend in Melbourne, she posted a PDF of a planter box she had just made. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I've put that up on the Facebook link. So if anyone wants the instructions and the breakdown, that's in the PDF. And I've got, you know, I just collect materials here. So I've got a lot of wood and timber. So perhaps we just come here. So things that you need legs. So this is kind of like making a little mini bed or a table or something. So you need some thick wood, for the legs there, and you're going to cut those into about 40 centimeters each. You need something like decking, so it's a thinner wood, a thinner timber, and that's going to create the slats of the bed. And then you also need a sheet of corrugated iron. So this one I have here is probably a little bit small. I think a standard sheet is 85 cents, but I went around the back of the house and I found this Perspex, and I'm like, oh, that will probably work too. So just have a look at what you've got around your place. Like, you know, we all clean up after for the cyclones and stuff, but I've still got a little stash of useful materials. I mean, maybe you've got an old bed base that you can pull apart. I've got a futon base, which I'm like, oh, you know, perhaps I can use that to make some more. So have a look at the materials you've got around. The tip shop, unfortunately, which I usually go to about twice a week, is shut at the moment. Oh, but Berrima Secondhand is open. So that's just out in Berrima, and they have a whole range of secondhand materials. So you know, you don't have to go to Bunnings. There's also great things. And also, I'm just reading the messages as they're coming through. There's also a fabulous Facebook site that started, which is called Barter. You know, I think a lot of people have unfortunately lost their jobs overnight, but one of the things that's come of it is this amazing exchange that's happening. So people going, hey, I've just got some timber around the backyard. Has anyone got some basil seedlings? And some cool swaps are happening. So just, yeah, you can think creatively about where to get the materials. So I won't make this live because it took me an afternoon. I'm not the best handy person. I'm okay, but I'm not the best. But you will need things like a saw. You'll need a drill. If you need to cut the corrugated iron, you'll need an angle grinder. Don't forget your earmuffs, your glasses, and then you'll need to scrounge around, find some bolts and screws. So this is also kind of just a useful thing. You know, it could also be a good home project if you've got time. Like whenever you pull things apart, like I put them into little containers like this of different size screws, so that when I come to a project like this, I've actually got the materials that I need just at home to use. So I'll show you the finished product.
Yep, we'll just turn around.
Cool, so these are the wooden frame legs, a bit thicker, the slats on the side. It's using the corrugated iron. It drains just through the little gap on the side, and I had some pieces of turmeric that I bought from the market, and I planted those out. They'll grow and spread to create more turmeric that I can harvest later. So my reason for doing a planter bed was because I'm actually sort of running out of garden space. Like there's so much shade and everything. So I'm kind of going, okay, I'm starting to encroach onto the courtyard. And yeah, I'll just give you an idea of also the things that you might want to be planting. So these are some seedlings that I had left over from last year, little okras, and there's also little chilies. So don't forget, you can collect your seeds each year. There's also these ones I got from Dundee Organics, and we've got tomatoes, beans, eggplants, and these are all really good dry season plants that I'm going to put in planter boxes like this, I reckon.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about these for the segment this morning before we move over to the other part of the garden where we will be doing our composting chat?
Oh, just one thing before we go. I'll just mention, so all this kind of compost soil that's in this bed, I made, that was my last batch of compost. So it's not perfect, but that's kind of what it's come down to. And this has been a mixture of my food scraps, horse poo, and then just sitting for a while. And when I shoveled this out, there were just so many bugs, like it was writhing with bugs and worms.
And bugs are a good sign, aren't they, that it's healthy?
Yeah, bugs are a really good sign because they're the organisms that are going to be breaking it down into a finer type soil for you.
And we have a question from Sandra. Where can I get seeds and seedlings locally? So actually, Georgia has all the advice.
So I love this business. They're called Dundee Organics, and they are online. They've got a website. I ordered these probably about 3 weeks ago, and they arrived. They were running out of stuff. I don't know if you noticed, but there's been like this mad, I'm calling it panic gardening. There's been a rush on seedlings and seeds, which is great. You know, it's great that everybody's getting out into their garden, but so keep an eye out for Dundee Organics website. There's also, so Bunnings, they do sell Plantsmith seedlings, which are locally grown by a guy called Simon. And yeah, he's a great guy. He's out, I think it's Howard Springs, Humpty Doo. And so they have little seedlings. I noticed that Organic Ag, which is a local business, the biggest organic business sort of in the Darwin area, they're selling seedlings out in Humpty Doo on Saturday morning. So we can put some links to that in this event, I reckon.
Yeah, we'll do a big post upload onto the Facebook event so everyone can have all the information. If you want to just maybe stand up and stretch for a moment, we'll move the camera around and reset up over in the composting corner. So one moment. Okay, so we're over in the composting section of the gardening and of the workshop, and George is going to talk us through all things composting. I'll hand it over to her.
I was just thinking, before we get started, there are a few questions. So we've done the seeds and seedlings. Tip from David. One thing I want to suggest is pumpkin vine tips. They're his favourite green veg for stir fry. And he says goodbye. So yeah, I agree with that. There's a lot of plants that you associate perhaps with, so sweet potatoes one, you think of the sweet potato roots, but you can actually eat the leaves. Same with pumpkins, you get pumpkins, but you can actually eat the tips are very tender. Same with cassava, you can use the leaves. So there's often plants have got multi-purposes. And yeah, there are a lot of great greens which grow really easily up here, and it's nice to have your fresh greens.
Yeah, and Rapid Creek markets sell a lot of these, especially sweet potato leaves, which I tried the first time when moving up here. And the farmer was actually telling me if you put some ginger and chili in it when you stir fry, they came out deliciously.
Cool. And what other questions we've got? We've got Michaela's says, I have lots of veggie mix soil left over. Can I add sand and use it as potting mix for the boxes? Yes, I reckon that would be fine. Yeah, just making sure there's enough nutrition in there. But yeah, a little sand will make it lighter. Michelle wants to know, I have a lot of, oh, I think that's the same. Yeah, cool. Okay, so compost. This is where I'd get you all to do like hands up. Who has an existing compost going on in their garden? I'm not sure if you can indicate. Yes, Carol does. Yes, no. Cool. Okay, so why I love composting. I think there's so many reasons. One is you're taking what you would otherwise be throwing out and putting in the rubbish tin, to the rubbish tip, but it's actually a really useful resource, which is fabulous for building up your soil, increases the nutrition, it helps to hold the water in the soil, And yeah, so it actually makes this fabulous, fabulous product from what you'd otherwise be throwing away. So it's like the ultimate recycling. And not to mention the benefits that when you, your food scraps, for example, when they go to the big pile at the tip, they actually release methane, which is a terrible greenhouse gas. It's more potent than carbon dioxide. So by composting, we're also stopping that emission of that greenhouse gas. Yes.
And talking about food waste, so that's something that COOLmob and the Environment Centre and I'm really passionate about reducing. And there was a study released by Costa earlier this week, and it showed that in 2017, on average, Australians individually sent 300 kilos of food waste to landfill each year, which is a huge amount. And food waste is something that we can all really easily try and reduce in our homes. And I'll be sharing in the chat as well our food waste audit tool that you can do at home over a week or two, just to see which items you find you're wasting the most, and those that aren't vegetable and fruit scraps that can be composted. It just gives you a bit of an insight into maybe some behaviours at home or things that you may not think are food waste. Once it all adds up, you can really easily see it, which should be quite helpful.
Cool. Thanks, Lou. So yeah, it's something we can just do so easily and so directly, and pretty much anything that you do with your food waste is going to be an improvement than sending it off in your red bin, in my opinion.
Definitely.
So they're all good reasons to get going with your compost. And what you need, so with this one, we're just going to deal with people who do have a patch of ground to use as a compost. We might in the future do another talk which is specifically for apartments, which is kind of a different setup. But with this one, so you're going to need a space. It's about sort of 1 by 1 meter for the minimum compost heap, just because that allows to get the heat and the temperature and enough materials up for it to break down efficiently. So you're going to need a spot to put your compost. Consider things like your neighbours, maybe not right next door to them, somewhere a bit out of the way. You also need to factor in things like dogs. You don't want to be attracting rats. So if you've got a compost bin that's not enclosed, then it's worth digging it down into the ground or not using that for the fresh food scraps. Other things to factor, there's different types of bins. So I've got a whole little selection that I've sort of collected from around my property and brought into my driveway just for convenience. Perhaps I can hold them up maybe. So you've probably seen sort of this one, the fairly stock standard one from Bunnings. We've got, you show this one?
Yep.
So this is the one, my tumbler bin is kind of my personal first stage for composting. And I'll just show, here's another type. So similar to the other black bin. But these are all just, I guess, equipment to help enclose the compost. You don't need any of it. You could just make a pile. Or, if you want to have a little home handy project, then yeah, pull out your corrugated iron, some wood frames or some posts or something, and you can just create an area. But yeah, you can also just make a pile. So, and the best thing is that we're just, all this material, like often people see it as rubbish and waste and send it off, do lots and lots of tip runs, but you don't need to, because this is actually what's going to protect your soil. It's going to encourage all those microorganisms and build it up. So it's really good just to keep all this material on site. So I've collected together the different things to make a compost bin, so to make a compost heap to get started. So we have dry materials. So that's pretty much anything brown. So things that are dried out like that are really high in carbon.
And it can be any kind of brown leaf, or we're only looking for certain trees, or basically anything?
Anything brown. So brown leaves, brown twigs. So I also have this that my friends bring me from their offices. So this is shredded paper, which would otherwise go into the rubbish bin. And so this is very low nutrient. It's kind of like your white bread or something. So it really is just a filler. I use this when I'm really desperate for more carbon. Here's whole piles of more brown material that I just collected.
Looks like a bird's nest.
Yeah. So this is kind of like all my prunings from the garden. Yeah. So these are getting onto green materials. I know it's brown. It's actually high in nitrogen, so we can call it a green material. This is horse poo that I got yesterday from the Rapid Creek stables for free. They've got a big pile there. There's also at the Lianya, they've got horse stables there.
Oh,
yeah.
For free for everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent. We'll put that tip in the chat as well for you all.
Sorry. more green materials. This morning I was just going around cutting back my garden, and this is what you get. And just on that note, so a lot of the stuff I cut back is actually often food plants. So, for example, we're talking about sweet potato before. That's, you know, some sweet potato that was growing out into my driveway, so I've just cut it back. But yeah, someone could take that, plant it, and then have a sweet potato spreading in their garden.
I might steal that one for my house.
So don't forget, people with established gardens are often pruning things back, and you know, this stuff we're you know, using it as green waste recycling. But yeah, if you can tap into them, yeah, you can. There's a lot of cool ways and easy, cheap ways to get your own garden going. So this, for example, is cassava. So you literally stick that cassava into the ground and get your own little cassava started. I've also cut back heaps of sweet leaves.
And we'll be having a bit of a cassava chat in a month or so with someone else on another workshop. So stay tuned for that one.
Anyway, sweet leaf is the same. There's some in there. So let's start building our compost. I'm not sure if you're doing this live with me at home. I hope so. It sounds kind of interactive and fun. But if not, you're welcome to just watch. So I've just put my bin here just for convenience. So what we want to do is we're creating a lasagna of brown and green layers. Ultimately, we want twice as much brown material as green material, remembering that the brown material is high in carbon, it's kind of the dry material. The green material is the high in nitrogen. So we're trying to balance out those components. So about twice as much brown as green. And then we create it just like a lasagna, doing layer after layer after layer and alternating them. And the more different materials we put in, kind of the richer and better compost we get at the end of it. So let's just start with this. Usually put something kind of sticky at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So pop that in there.
Got a bit of a bed there, if you can see.
I'll just grab my secateurs.
Hopefully that's not too sunny for everyone to see. Might do it this way. Oh, we've got a question about onion. Can onion go in the compost?
I actually put all food scraps in my compost, except for animal products, just so it doesn't attract the rats and the maggots and things like that. But yeah, but people do get specific about not putting things in. I personally, pretty much all fruit and vegetable scraps I put in mine. Yeah.
Yeah, same actually. We do onion and garlic as well. All right, so we've chopped up some green.
Yeah, I can't find my secateurs, but that's okay. So there's some long grass I pulled out this morning. That's definitely green. So I could, if I needed more brown material, I could leave this out in the sun for a couple of days and it would become the high carbon, but at the moment it's the green material. A layer of that, and then I've got all my brown leaves. I'm going to put some of the horse poo in. So if you've got chickens, you could use chook too as well.
And we've just had a question about the ratios, and we will post those online for you. But Georgia did say we're going to aim for 2 brown to 1 green ratio.
Yes. Yeah. Gonna add some more brown materials. So we're really just creating those layers. I do have food scraps, but they're upstairs in my little compost bin. Now, if I could find my secateurs, I would chop these into smaller pieces. So the smaller the pieces are, the more they have a surface area and the more exposed they are to those microorganisms that are going to break them down. So the smaller you chop up and kind of the less dense the materials are, the faster they're going to break down. So it's worth, just with your scissors or your secateurs, chopping things up a little bit into smaller pieces. And the same thing, if you put something big and dense, like if you put in like a whole old sweet potato, that's going to take longer to break down than if it was cut into smaller pieces.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic of food scraps, while Georgia is just building her lasagna here, it's a good idea if you have too many food scraps, you can freeze them so they don't smell a lot and then put them in the compost, which a lot of people in apartments do. They save it up over a week and then go to a friend's compost if they can't get there every day to make sure that food waste isn't going to landfill.
And do you want to tell them about the Share Waste site? Do you know that?
Oh, yeah. And there is a site called Share Waste, which is also an app, I think, where you can connect to people in your neighbourhood and street who have composts, who are looking for more food scraps, or people with food scraps who, for whatever reason, don't have a compost and want a nearby compost to share. So that's a really great connecting tool that you can get onto. So we've got a question here.
Oh, yeah.
When adding the food layers, do you add it in between the layer or all on top?
Okay, so with the food scraps, it kind of depends a little bit what sort of bin you have, because ultimately you just don't want to attract rats. So I would, if I had food scraps, I'd kind of probably actually not do it with this open-sided bin. I'd use that kind of bin, which is sealed and buried it down a little bit, or this kind of bin which is enclosed. And if it's enclosed, then it doesn't really matter where, but if it's more open, then pop it in the middle, in the center, where it's going to be harder for animals to get in.
And I mean, I have one of these open ones and I put my food scraps on, but then I go into the garden and put some brown matter on top each time. Do you think that helps as well?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, covering it up just so it's not enticing and it's not easy. You're not kind of going, hey, there's a feast here.
Yeah. And how do you know about adding to the bulk pile with the steady stream of food scraps coffee grounds? I'm not sure I understand that one. But yeah, coffee grounds are really good for the compost. Yep. What are they full of? Is it nitrogen or?
Yeah, that'd be nitrogen.
Nitrogen.
Coffee grounds. Yeah, coffee grounds are good.
I know that Bessa Cafe and Laneway, when they were open, were giving away bags of coffee grounds at the end of the day.
Oh, wow.
And you can always go and ask your local cafe if they're willing to even put it out the front for you, because this saves them money at the end of the day in getting that waste taken to landfill.
Yeah, actually we're doing that with CDU for a while, picking up their food scraps and coffee grounds.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Don't get much. So how are people doing their compost at home as well?
Or are you in your living room, because it's very hot today? Oh, and we had a question about scrub foul. Scratching the pile away. I guess the solution to that would be putting it in a container or a box.
Yes, giving it sides. So some kind of boundaries. Using the corrugated iron to create the boundaries, or even you can make something out of pallets, just something to contain it. But the good news there is if the scrub fowl are in the pile, that means that you've probably got lots of worms, you've got lots of bugs, it's enticing the animals in. And the scrub fowl will also turn the pile over for you, so they're doing some of your work.
Oh, yes, I know, their feet move so quickly. Our garden is a mess from them. Okay, so this is where we're looking right now.
I might not do this one full up.
Okay.
But, on the top, we want to put a layer of the brown.
Okay, so in case you didn't hear that, a layer of brown on the top.
And I'll just have to get the hose because we need to water it in.
Okay. While she's doing that, I'll just show you around her beautiful garden there. And I was at Bunnings yesterday, in case you can't get out to where Georgia mentioned you can get seeds, and they actually have a lot more. They've restocked, which is good news as well.
Yeah. So we just water it in, and I guess that's to wet those carbon materials. So with the compost, I don't know if you can hear me over the hose, but so with this system, this is kind of, you put all your materials in and then you leave it probably about 6 to 8 weeks. You will need to turn it over. So about once a week, you'll have to move it over, mix it all up, get the air into the materials. And, but otherwise, probably 6 to 8 weeks, you're going to have something that looks like compost at the end. And the longer you leave it, then the more refined it becomes. So if you're up to that potting mix texture, which I personally never get to because I'm not that patient, then you leave it longer, like maybe 12 weeks or so. But if you're after something that's more like mulch, then yeah, you can use it fairly quickly.
Okay. And to turn it, you can just use a shovel?
Yeah, a shovel or a pitchfork. Yeah, so I just kind of shuffle the bin over and then throw it all back in, mix it all up together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the stage where you can use it in, like how you used it in your planter box,
yeah,
you would have waited to get that consistency that you had about 12 or 8 weeks, 6 weeks?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got this. This is probably more kind of mulchy consistency. You can see there's still like big wood chippy things in there. It's got some other materials, but it's perfectly fine putting mulch on the garden. Yeah, the one I put in the bed was a bit more refined than that. So my personal composting process, because I also have quite a few people who drop food scraps off me, is I kind of have a progressive compost going with the enclosed roller bin. So I spin that, I put my food scraps in there just because it means that, it doesn't attract any of the rodents. And I add to that until it kind of gets to the point where I can't see, items in it, like vegetables. It's not like, it's more perhaps sort of this kind of consistency. And then I move it to a pile outside, and just having it on the ground attracts more organisms in there. It breaks down further. It kind of gets exposed to rain and stuff like that. Yeah, it breaks down, and then, I put it into the bed that I want to use it in. So I kind of have a 2-step compost process myself.
Cool. And we had a question about how much water and how often should we be watering our compost, particularly as we move into the dry?
Yeah, I would say at least every week. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because over the wet season, you don't really think about it. It does depend a little bit on how much, like if you put lots of food scraps in there, they will actually leak out their own water. So perhaps the best idea is the consistency of it. You want it to be kind of damp sponge consistency. So like if it's turned into a puddle, sometimes I've seen some of my friends compost, it's just like this putrid little lake thing happening, too wet. But yeah, if it's kind of damp sponge, that's a good consistency for your compost.
Excellent.
Perhaps the other thing, I just think perhaps we would go somewhere with
Actually, one question about this mulchy product you've got here.
Yeah.
Could that be used as the mulch on top of the planter box, like that consistency?
Yeah, that would be fabulous because it's going to help keep the moisture in the soil, protect the soil from the baking sun, add nutrition. So absolutely cool mulch on top.
Great.
I was just thinking, what was the other thing? Oh, okay, troubleshooting. So I have put up a PDF that is kind of all about this whole process, and it's on that event page as a link. But on there's some really good kind of tips, tricks, and also diagnosing compost problems. So things like if you've got ants in your compost, usually means it's too dry. If you've got maggots, which I think is the most common problem I see people with, is the maggots. One, it means that the flies can get in there, either it's in your compost bin in your kitchen or it's outside and it's exposed, then they're getting in there. But it also means you've just got too much food scraps, because often people add all their food scraps, but they don't collect the dry materials. So you've got to remember to keep adding twice as much dry material as the food scraps you're putting in. Otherwise you end up with maggots. Other things, cockroaches is usually too acidic. So you can get into this kind of quite scientific chemical balance of pH and things like that with compost. But yeah, if you kind of just look at it, like it shouldn't smell, you should be happy to kind of touch it and it feels nice. It's kind of got an earthy sort of smell, then you're on the right track.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions coming through? Why do some compost bins have holes and others not? Which is the best option?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So they've both got their merits, kind of positives and negatives. So if it's enclosed with no holes, it means that, you can't get any pests in there. But if it's got holes, it allows oxygen to get in there. So water and oxygen are two key ingredients that the organisms need to break down the organic matter. So it's a little bit, so for example, that's why with my food scraps, I put it in the enclosed bin, but then I put it out into a pile, just because then it kind of does actually break down faster, I reckon.
Yeah, and a builder told my husband that fiberboard could be mulched. What do we think about that? That's another question.
Ooh, fiberboard.
Ooh, I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, if it's got, I feel like I need to know what fiberboard is.
We might have a look into that one.
Yeah. I mean, like anything that's sort of organic matter, if it doesn't have chemicals, it's not painted. I know I've got a cladding house. I think that might be called fiberboard, but there's asbestos in it, so I would not be composting that. Just like if it's just kind of compressed wood material, then that's fine. Same, like you get lots of cardboard and even like the junk mail that sneaks into my letterbox sometimes, or letters and things. You can throw that in your compost as well. Like you don't even have to put it in the recycling bin. Like it's all carbon. You can tear it up into pieces, throw it in the compost bin.
That's such a good tip.
Yeah,
because I normally do the mushroom bags. If I forget to bring my own to the supermarket, I just tear up those brown paper bags and put them in the compost. I didn't think about the junk mail. That's a good one.
Yeah, so it's very direct, like rather than kind of, a truck picking it up, taking it away, maybe you're not quite sure what happens at the other end. You can go, okay, I'm taking this and I'm turning it into something else.
And then, if you think something has been treated with chemicals, we would just not put that in, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, so the things not to put in there, your meat scraps, dairy products. People do eggshells if you've washed them out and cleaned them. And then
you need to wash them, do you?
Yeah, just because they do attract maggots.
Okay.
Yeah. Then dog poo's a no-no. what other things?
What about someone had a question before, like a dead animal from their garden, maybe like a rat or something? Would you put that in or not?
No. but when I do,
see, I would have thought you could. So this is why we have Georgia.
I personally dig a hole and bury it. Yeah, just because you don't want to. If you're turning your compost a week later, you don't want to get a partly decomposed rat. Yeah, nah. I dig a deep hole, bury it. That's my view.
Good.
Yeah.
And I think that's all the questions. So, did you have anything else, Georgia?
No, I don't think so. But yeah, just check like all this information, both the PDF for the veggie planter bed and also all this compost tips. They're all up on that event page on Facebook. So yeah, if I've forgotten anything, it's in that.
Yep, and we'll go through today and make sure that's all there for you. And thank you everyone for tuning into our first online workshop. Of course, we had some teething issues, but that's to be expected. And we hope you enjoyed it. And keep an eye out on the COOLmob and ECNT Facebook for new workshops as they pop up. And you can always register for the Zoom link on the ECNT website because we are currently upgrading our COOLmob website. So we won't be posting them on there for now. And if you have any suggestions, definitely email us at admin@ecnt.org because I'm always looking for new ideas. And even if you are a local expert on something about sustainable living, we'd love for you to join us.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And thanks for all the feedback we're getting. That's really encouraging. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Georgia.
Bye-bye.
See you. That's just stopped. Ooh.